second wind has arrived, direct from Urizen. The Pass. In the lead-up to the winter solstice, the Druge advance into Morrow was stalled, and turned back by the combined forces of Urizen, the League, Varushka, and the supernatural allies from the realms of day and winter. The Malamorks had their precarious fingerhold in Operus denied to them, and were then hard-pressed to regain control of Caeley. While victory was sweet, it was also bitter. Wherever the Druge had touched Morrow, they had scarred it with their malice, perhaps indelibly. During the winter solstice, the heroes of the Empire struck behind Druge lines at a force camped near the terraces and farms of Arbiter's Green. The sight of the now ruined Gardens of Morrow saw a vicious battle against the Orcs of the Malum, resulting in a significant number of supplies being captured and delivered to the Citadel Guard, offering them much needed support for the coming season. Indeed, thanks to this brave action, the Urizen army was not only able to sustain itself in the following months, but potentially begin to recover from its dire situation. Providing no more of the nation is lost, the Citadel Guard will be able to support itself without external assistance. It is perhaps unsurprising that in the wake of such a success, the mood among the armies camped in southeastern Morrow is increasingly positive. Now all that remains to be done is to capitalise on the successes of the previous months and finally break the Druge, driving them back out of Morrow and reclaiming Perigro and Caeley. The Citadel Guard leads the attack, first south to build on gains made in Caeley and north up into Perigro. The Urizen soldiers march with the protection of Winter's Mantle, the power of cyclic magic allowing them to turn aside mortal injuries, as long as some of their allies bear those injuries for them. At their side, 3,000 Knights of Glory, called from the Summer Realm in the name of Eleonaris. Tall, red-haired warriors in fine mithril plate, wielding deadly long spears and vicious single-bladed swords. They hunt with the aid of great golden hawks, whose talons are encased in mithril razors, the better to pluck out the eyes of the Druge scouts. Summer Knights also march with the Varushkan armies. Accompanying the Northern Eagle are a host of heavily armoured Schlachter wrapped in gold and crimson cloaks with spreading antlers and deadly axes. They, too, help to hunt the Druge with thin-whipped hounds of ghostly mine, whose barking fills the hearts of cowards with overwhelming fear. Along with the Iron Helms, they press into Perigro, seeking to harry the flanks of the Druge. The Wolves of War, along with well-paid Varushkan wagon raiders, Imperial Orc reavers, and daring freeborn adventurers, strike at Druge camps and fallen spires, denying the Orcs the treasure they stole from Urizen, as well as claiming a bounty of herbs from the Druge defenders. The Tower Jacks coordinate the campaign, using runners and scattered Heliopticon towers to send messages swiftly to the other armies. Their forces too are enchanted, with supernatural insight that puts them into the ideal position to guide the Imperial strategy. They also hang back because they are protecting the workers responsible for erecting new Heliopticon towers, including a replacement for the central tower that once stood in Caeley. Further magic rests over Morrow. Every drop of water is rich with healing power. No injury save the most grievous proves fatal. Everything short of execution heals quickly, leaving no scars. While the crystalline fortress that has encased Canterspire has faded away, many of the heralds of Phaleron have remained behind, doing their best to offer succour and support to the people of Urizen. At the same time, the eerie giant hounds summoned into the hills of Altis range forth across the whole territory. Sometimes they fight alongside the Imperial armies, Sometimes they busy themselves in lone hunts against the Druge. Hunting the Druge. And they must be hunted. The Eastern Orcs do not engage Imperial forces. There are no true battles this season in Morrow. The twisted banners of the Druge armies are not seen. Only the assassins, saboteurs, and ambushers they are wont to leave behind remain in the hills and woodlands. They must still be rooted out lest they present an enduring threat, but the actual armies seem to have vanished. It does not do to become overconfident when fighting the Druge, however. They are more than capable of lulling their enemies into a false sense of security so that they overextend themselves and walk into a prepared trap. The Empire's armies must still tread with care, but their advance is largely uncontested. The spires of first Cayley and then Perigro are liberated, and the story of the Druge retreat pieced together from the scattered survivors. Almost as soon as the winter solstice was ended, the armies of the Druge fled Morrow. They did not even pause to take slaves with them or to slaughter the captured Urizen, as is so often their wont. Instead, they bundled up their ill-gotten gains and withdrew the way they came, along the trod south into Procaris, back into Zenith. There are still soldiers to kill, but they are scattered, going to ground. The aid of supernatural allies, hawks and hounds and wolves, and keen-eyed librarians give the Empire the advantage. There is a lot of ground to cover, but many of these left behind warbands are rooted out and slain before they can find suitable places to hide. The Empire has won in Morrow, an uncontested victory. There are still tragedies, such as the spire of the Red Sun in Perigro, where the Druge took the time to kill as many of their captured Urizen as they could find. More common is to find a spire where the people have already made the same choice as those at the Arbiter's seat, accepting the gift of Kayla, embracing painless death and the hope of reincarnation rather than continue to remain in the hands of the Druge. In several of these spires there are tearful stories of the Druge telling their prisoners that the Empire was in retreat, that Morrow would soon be dominated entirely by the Orcs just as Zenith was, that the other nations had abandoned Urizen. Those who believed these lies are mourned by those who denied them. Several spires now stand as empty monuments to the invasion and the terrible malice of the Druge. Zenith. When the Highborn armies made their slow fighting retreat west out of Zenith, they laid down their lives to buy as much time as possible for the people to flee tomorrow. Many escaped, but many more were left behind and are now enslaved by the Druge. A very few have trusted to magic to shroud their spires, but for many, the protection of the Veil of Shadows was beyond their capabilities. They now languish under the cruel whip of the Orcs of the Malum. With an aura of despair settling over the territory, it seems that hope of a speedy resolution has been extinguished. Shortly before the winter solstice, however, bands of sentinels from the spires of Eastern Morrow and Northern Spiral, and from the groups who were lucky enough to escape Zenith before it fell, hatched a plan to make a surprise attack into Zenith, to rescue as many of the people left behind as they could. They received additional support from highborn soldiers, some hoping against hope to recover lost comrades taken by the Orcs. The plan also gains the approval of those heralds of Phaleron, who had been actively helping citizens of Morrow reach safety over the last season. In the weeks after the winter solstice, then, while the Imperial armies move into Cayley and Perigro, bands of Imperial heroes move over the mountains east and south from Morrow, and north from Redoubt into Zenith. For the most part they use the high passes, many of which are known only to the Sentinels of Urizen, and with as much stealth as they can muster they begin to pick their way across Zenith. They find a territory much transformed. The air is thick with that horrible clawing dread that seems to pool in any land the Druge control for long enough. It exasperates very real fear of being spotted, of being captured, of becoming subject to the cruel torments of the Druj. It also plays on more subtle fears. Fears that it is already too late for the people of Zenith. Fear that the entire enterprise is a mistake. For those looking to find specific loved ones, it is even worse. It takes great spiritual strength to endure the touch of this oppressive atmosphere, even though it is comparatively new. The purpose of the raid is to rescue people, not to strike directly at the Druj, but it proves difficult to avoid altercations. Most of the left-behind spires are still occupied, but wherever there are humans, there are also orcs. Sometimes it is possible to evacuate some or all of the people by stealth, but more often a diversion is required. There is rarely an opportunity for full-on assault, and some of the major spires are simply too well defended to do more than scout them. That said, there seem to be fewer actual Druj warriors in Zenith than might have been expected. There is at least one army here, perhaps more. The raid is focused on getting people to safety, not on scouting enemy emplacements. But it certainly does not seem that all the armies that retreated from Morrow straight after the winter solstice are camped here in Zenith. Rescued prisoners lack any real understanding of Druj movements, but they agree that a large number of orcs came down from the north shortly after the winter solstice, but they did not stay. Where they went, however, none can say. There is no doubt that the Druj control the entire territory. From Eteri in the west to Lustri and Okursion in the east, there are orcs everywhere, and their touch is on everything. They have raised potent spring magic to infuse the waters of Zenith with healing magic, a cruel touch that allows them to torment their slaves as they wish, in the knowledge that anything short of death will be healed the next morning. They have also raised magical protections in Precaris and Lustri. The marshes and forests themselves seem to favour the Druj and hinder the Imperial heroes. Animals attack without warning, and it is all too easy to become lost and stranded by eerie mists and deceptive lights that drift among them. On a more mundane level, they have taken control of several spires and raised makeshift fortifications around them. For example, Spire Calator in Eteri, the spire that once led Urizen in the creation of the Yubashti, is now a prison for artisans and crafters, forced to toil making magic weapons for the Druj. Beneath the towers, ringed now with spiked-covered walls reminiscent of the old spires of the Dusk in the Barrens, a great work camp has been set up. Here, Urizen slaves are forced to work the rich dragonbone deposits of Eteri, beaten mercilessly if they fail to fulfill punishingly quotas every day. A concerted attack early in the campaign frees a number of these slaves, quickly led back up the river into Morrow with the aid of Phaeron's guides. There is no real opportunity to attack Spire Calator, however. There are simply too many Druj garrisoned in the place. The broken ruins of the Arch of the Sky provide a temporary base of operations for some of the raiders, allowing them to launch a series of daring strikes and evacuate as many people as they could to meet up with Imperial troops engaged in the liberation of Caeley and Perigro. In particular, a joint attack by Highborn and Dornish warbands supported by Urizen sentinels manages to liberate an entire camp of miserable soldiers, captured from the Highborn armies and put to work tilling the marshy farms of Precaris. Tired, tormented, subject to regular bouts of starvation, they refused to surrender to despair, and their courage served to keep many of the others interred with them from breaking under the dual pressure of miasma and orc spite. Not everyone is as lucky. Even more so than in Morrow, it is too easy to give in to despair and seek escape from life as a captive of the Druj. There are stories of whole spires, including at least one shrouded beneath the veil of night magic, where secrets of sorrow and a chance to seek reincarnation through the labyrinth seem like the only option. The Druge, it is said, hate and fear this gift of Kayla. It robs them of their slaves. Worse, it robs them of a chance to torment them. Once it is clear death is certain, not only can their victims deny them the pleasure of torture, but they leave no bodies behind to display to spread fear among their remaining prisoners. Only the bravest warbands risk infiltrating Accursion and Lustry. It would be all too easy to get cut off, trapped deep in enemy territory with nowhere to flee to save the Malum or Spiral. There seem, paradoxically, to be fewer Druge here and thus fewer prisoners. There are exceptions, but here the problem is that one group of Arisen is liberated. They must still be escorted long distances to get them to safety. As the season goes on, it becomes harder and harder to take the Druge unawares. There are more patrols, and the preparedness of Orc garrisons increases. But even so, the Druge cannot be everywhere at once. Zenith is a wild country, and for once the wilderness between the spires plays into the hands of the Urizen rather than the invaders. There are stories of desperate flight, of hiding silently beneath bridges while Druge patrols pass overhead, of rocks sent tumbling down to seal narrow passes, and of whole spires worth of adults and children floating down the river on makeshift floats under the very noses of Orc garrisons. Some warbands report unlooked for allies in the raid into Zenith. A handful of the baleful hounds summoned to help protect Morrow appear to have taken it upon themselves to accompany a few of the groups risking all to liberate the people of Zenith. They are particularly drawn to champions with Draugr blood, and fight savagely alongside them whenever they engage the Druge. Their influence is not entirely benign, however. Those Draugr who accept their aid quickly begin to turn savage, like black mirrors held up to the Druge they oppose. In other parts of the territory, especially in Precarious and Lustry, there are reports of heralds of both Spring and Night Realms emerging from the marshes and the woods to offer aid to groups of freed slaves, helping them to get to safety. They will not fight the Druge directly for the most part, but there are stories of sudden mists that arise from the woods to confuse pursuit, or twists in the weather that send torrential rain to cover trails, and even one incident of great trees rousing itself briefly to life to smash the life from a Druge sentry before freezing back into immobility once more. It takes the better part of 3 months, but at last the heroes stumble back into Redoubt and Morrow from Zenith. It becomes possible to appreciate the true scale of what has been achieved. Thousands of people. Thousands of magicians, farmers, sentinels, priests, children, artisans, soldiers. Thousands rescued from under the very noses of the Druge. Among those thousands, more than 700 soldiers from the Granite Pillar, the valiant Pegasus and the Seventh Wave, and over 200 sentinels eager to join with the Citadel Guard and strike a blow of their own against the enemies of Arisen. These people have kept themselves alive in the certain knowledge that the Empire had not forgotten them. And now that trust has been repaid. Thank you for listening and watching to the second Wind of War. Hopefully more will be out soon, and we will get them to you as soon as we can. That has been The Pass, Morrow and Zenith.